Hi, in this video, you're going to learn how to identify the main idea of paragraphs, whether it is for summarizing a book chapter, an article that you read for one of your classes, or to respond to questions on an English test, whether in school or the university. And in order to understand how to find the main idea, we first need to understand something about the structure of paragraphs. Every paragraph has two major types of sentences. One is called the key sentence, which contains the main idea, and at least two or three detailed sentences, which contain examples, explanations, or statistics, and their purpose is to support the main idea. So what I did for this video in order to help you identify main ideas and distinguish them from sentences which are detailed sentences, I've put together a collection of phrases that are usually seen in sentences that are main ideas as opposed to sentences that are detailed sentences. And if you're able to distinguish between sentences which are key sentence, which is the key sentence, and detailed sentences, then basically you can just cross out sentences which are detailed sentences, and eventually you will be left out with the one sentence which is the key sentence or the main idea. So if you have a sentence that starts with words or phrases like in short, in sum, in summary, and in brief, this usually indicates that the sentence is the main idea. However, if you have sentences that start with phrases like, for example, for instance, for one, case in point, is illustrated or is exemplified by, this indicates that you're looking at a detailed sentence. And if so, you can just ignore this sentence. However, there are other examples of sentences, of words or signals to detailed sentences. So for example, if you see names of particular people and places, this will never be the main idea because this is a detail. Numbers, statistics, and if you have sentences that start or contain words like first, second, next, then later, this certainly indicates that we're talking about detailed sentences as opposed to main idea. So the million-dollar question is, where do we find the main idea? Where is it? Is it the first sentence, the second sentence, the last sentence? Well, the answer is that it can be anywhere, but there are rules of thumb. The first rule is that it's usually the first sentence, usually. However, it can also be the second or further sentence. Now, it might sound confusing, but you have to understand the idea. If you look at a paragraph, if a paragraph has the first sentence of a paragraph is general, and then the second sentence has details or phrases like, for example, for instance, or statistics, then we can assume that the first sentence is the main idea. Okay. However, sometimes the detail sentence, the first detail sentence of the paragraph will appear in the third sentence, or maybe the fourth sentence if it's a very long paragraph. If the first detailed sentence, the first time you see a phrase like for instance, for example, or you see numbers or statistics, the first time you see this is in the third sentence, then we can assume that the main idea is in the second sentence. However, if you see for the first time the details, the numbers, the statistics in the fourth sentence, then it's reasonable to assume that the main idea will be in the third sentence. However, in a few minutes, I will show you a trick that will help you identify and put your finger on the main idea for certain. It's not based on science, but in my 20-year experience of teaching at the university and college level, I can tell you that it always works. Now, the main idea could also be in the last sentence. You probably heard this from teachers or read about this on the internet, but again, usually it will be the first sentence. Okay? All right. So before we move on to a trick that I want to show you, I just want to say that, and it's important for you to understand that sometimes there is no key sentence, there's no main idea in a paragraph. And you might ask yourself, well, how is this possible? you just said that every paragraph contains a key sentence and several detailed sentences? Well, I'll explain. Sometimes there is a paragraph, let's say paragraph 1, which contains a main idea, let's say in the first sentence, and then there are several detailed sentences that are designed to support this key sentence or main idea. And then the second paragraph starts out with details and ends with details. The whole paragraph contains details which provide further support, more statistics, more examples to support the main idea that was presented in the first paragraph. So it's really possible that there is a paragraph that contains no key sentence and will be fairly easy to identify. You'll see that the first sentence has a number or a phrase like, for example, and the second sentence also has some kind of detail. And if you look through all the sentences, you'll see that there's really no key sentence, but rather just a lot of details and supporting information. Let's do an exercise. Look at this paragraph. Let's read it together. The new museum at Mount Vernon displays 3 wax statues of our country's first president. One replica, and I emphasize this on purpose for you to easily identify the 3 statues. So one replica or reproduction portrays Washington at age 19. Another statue shows him at age 45, leading the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War in the fight for independence from the British. The third, meaning the third statue, right, shows Washington in 1789 at age 57 being sworn in as the first US president. Experts use historical documents, paintings, and digital technology to hypothesize or make an educated guess about what Washington looked like at each age. So because I've emphasized the phrases, one replica and another statue and the third, it's fairly easy to see that these are detailed sentences, okay? But let's say it wasn't easy for me to identify, or I missed somehow, I didn't really pay attention to these key words, okay? But I do think that for some reason, the first sentence is the main idea, because we also said that it's usually the main idea, okay? So I'll take the first sentence, look at the next slide, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the sentence into a question, okay? I'm going back, see? The new museum at Mount Vernon displays 3 wax statues of our country's first president. Okay, and I'm turning that into a question by adding does at the beginning. Does the new museum at Mount Vernon display 3 wax statues of our country's first president? Now, if you go back to the paragraph and you read the sentences after the first one, right? You look at the second sentence, the third, fourth, fifth, etc. If they answer the question, they say, yes, Mount Vernon displays 3 wax statues, then bingo, you've put your finger on the right sentence, which is the main idea. All right, let's do another example. Look at this one. There are gender differences in adolescents' satisfaction with their bodies. Compared with boys, girls are usually less happy with their bodies and have more negative body images. Also, as puberty proceeds, girls often become even more dissatisfied with their bodies. This is probably because their body fat increases. In contrast, boys become more satisfied as they move through puberty, probably because their muscle mass increases. Now, in this paragraph, it's really harder to say for sure which sentence is the main idea, because it's difficult to point to the detailed sentences. There are no sentences with phrases like, for example, for instance. There are no numbers, there are no statistics, there are no names of people, okay? So in that case, you can assume that it's probably the first sentence. But again, you have to check yourself. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the first sentence, change it into a question, and then read the other sentences. If they answer the question, then bingo, I found the main idea. All right, so look at the next slide. This is the question. Are there gender differences in adolescents' satisfaction with their bodies? All right, and if you go back, you read the second sentence, for example. It reads, compared with boys, girls are usually less happy with their bodies and have more negative body images. So there's a comparison here, right? So it does talk about gender differences. So it looks like this is an answer. It answers the question. Also, as puberty proceeds, girls often become even more dissatisfied with their bodies, so focuses more on girls. This is probably because their body fat increases. In contrast, boys, right? So now we do see a contrast, okay, or an emphasis on gender differences. So in contrast, boys become more satisfied as they move through puberty, probably because their muscle mass increases. So this works all the time, not based on science, but in my experience, it always helped my students. So I'd like to sum up this video. We've learned to identify the main idea. We learned to distinguish between main ideas and detailed sentences. We've learned to identify main ideas and detailed sentences. And we also learned how to check ourselves if we are taking a test or if we're summarizing a paper and we want to summarize it by just writing down main ideas. We learn how to check ourselves to make sure that we really did check the right sentence. I hope you found this video useful. If you liked it, please click on the like button. If you want to be posted on future videos, I will be posting a video every week. Please click on the notification bell. And if you like the video, I would be happy if you can support it by pressing subscribe. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.